and then Death walks in the door and he freaks out and he shoots Death in the face.
Yes.
And then in the next chapter, it's like, oh, now you're Death. That's how you become Death. You kill Death, so now you're Death, and you'll pass it on to somebody who kills you.
100%, but you get it in the first chapter.
Right. Yeah. No, that's what I was saying. Yeah. You do 100% get it in that first chapter. You just get it in the last couple of paragraphs of it.
Which is fine, because a reader that likes enough of your style to keep reading past your first page will probably give you the first chapter.
Yeah.
Like if they're not put off by your style, they'll probably give you the first chapter. And if your hook is at the end of the chapter, that's soon enough, right? It's cool. But the genre element has to be there.
Right. The hook for the story.
Or it has to be in your prologue. One of the two.
Everything else in that chapter was very interesting. So there was nothing that you were always like, oh, this is interesting. What's going to happen here? Oh, this is interesting. And then it just comes out of the left field.
Releasing your inner dragon.
So, Drake, I think it's time that we turned our attention once again to new beginnings. It is a new year, after all. And I think it is worth revisiting how you start your novel. So what is your least favorite way a novel opens?
Poorly. No, I'm sure you want a little bit more than that. Man, that's a question that's loaded, because there's like, I don't know if there's any one that's like the worst way, because there's so much and so many things that that we're going to talk about today. You start in a spot that's before your story actually starts, because you feel like you need that time and it's just boring and nothing happens and whatever. Or what most people do is start too late, and then it's like, you get your opening line and then you get like a half a chapter of a backstory, a flashback that happened last week, and it's like, well, why didn't you start last week? Like, why are we starting here if you're going to spend all this time last week? But also not connecting the reader to the character, not introducing your conflict, not grounding the reader in so many people. I think okay, all right, I got one. I got one that probably kills me more than any of the others, now that I've been meandering down that path. Forgetting the fact that the only person that gives a crap about your story at the first word is you. And so you come up with this cool idea that you're like, oh, I know this story and I know everything about it. So if it starts in this way that's incredibly vague and incredibly esoteric, that makes me feel giddy. But the reader is like, I don't understand any of this. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why do I care? And you're like, well, you care because of all this stuff in the story that you don't know about yet. And it's like, yeah, exactly. Why do I care? I think that's it. I think that's got to be my number one thing, when the writer writes for themselves in the opening chapter and forgets that their job is to make the reader fall in love with their story at a level that they're going to want to continue following that story. I'd say that has to be it.
My least favorite way to start a novel is with a character backstory. Mm-hmm. I can tolerate a world backstory. Like, I love fantasy worlds enough that I will grind through a little bit of a world, blah, 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 if I have to, right? I won't like you for it, but I'll do it. I'll do it. I did it in the 80s. I can do it again.
Yeah, I did it in the 70s and 80s, and now I just want to slip my wrist.
But I'll do it. I will do it. It's doable. But if you start me with a character backstory, like I'm reading an RPG character that, one of my players is sent in that they're going to play in my game, and I just feel like, my dude, I'm not GMing your story. You're the author. I don't feel like doing work here and understanding your character before I care.
Yeah.
I don't know you. Stop trying to make me love you. So that's my least favorite.
Stop telling me to love you and make me love you,
Yes.
because that's what they're doing. That
Yes.
actually happened. I critiqued something here recently where I got through the whole piece and I was like, the only reason why I know this person is cool is because in the opening paragraph you said, this guy is so cool. And then I read an entire chapter where the guy was not cool, like in any way, shape, or form. And it's like, just because you told me something as fact, it's not what it seems. Actually, no, it wasn't that. It was a romance. That's what it was. It was a romance, and it was started off with like, her boyfriend loves her so much, and then for the entire chapter, he was a total douchebag to her, like just. And I'm like, this guy does not love her. Yeah, he does. I said it in the opening chapter, the opening paragraph. I'm like, yeah, no. What you showed me was a guy who just does not give a shit about the girl sitting next
What
to him.
you said was I love you. What you showed me was a toxic relationship.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So, yeah, you can't just tell the reader something and then show them something else, because they're going to pick up on what you show them,
Yeah.
not in what you tell them. And again, that goes back to me talking about all the time where, I have my Drakeism of head book versus paper book. In your head book, he loves her very, very much. In your paper book, he's a douchebag. So, like,
Yeah.
you got to do something to make those two match.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a very weak opening if you tell me a thing and then immediately contradict it by showing me something entirely different.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's not that, and to their credit, it's not like they were kicking her in the face and all this other stuff. They weren't doing anything horrible, but there was just nothing that was done there. Like, she had a hangover. She was just waking up from a hangover and they're driving somewhere. And he kind of picks on her, which is exactly what a boyfriend would do to a girlfriend, whatever. But I'm like, but you mentioned that he stopped for gas while she slept. What about if he picks on her and then he's like, but hey, I didn't want to wake you while I got gas, but I did get you a Gatorade because I know you're going to need this because you had a little bit too. It's going to make you feel better. Like, so we get a little bit of the picking on it because that's what people do to each other. But then we have this show of, but I was thinking about you and I want to take care of you. And so here I bought this thing for you without you even asking me. And I'm like, little things like that would go a long way to going, oh, this guy, he actually does care about her. So yeah, that's kind of where it was at. So it wasn't toxic. It just didn't show.
No, I get it.
Right.
I get it. So I think that we've said what we don't like, and I think that it's important to list what we don't like. But I do also want to emphasize what you should do. So the converse of giving the backstory of the character, what is a good opening is something that attaches me to the character. Give me a reason to emotionally resonate with the point of view character or the focal character or the narrating character or whatever the main character of this chapter is, this first chapter of yours. Give me a good emotional resonance point. And and I'm there for you. Like, I will finish that chapter at the very minimum.
Yeah, I mean, and I say that all the time. If you want to win the story, all you have to do is win the reader. And while it's easy in theory, because to win the reader, all you have to do is make the reader care about the POV character, care about what they love, care about what they hate, care about what they don't want to lose, care about what they're trying to gain. Because as soon as you do that, you own the reader. And now anything you want the reader to feel, you just make that character feel. If I want you to feel betrayed, then the character gets betrayed. But you care about this character now. You care that they just lost this thing, that they were just betrayed. So technically you were betrayed. Or if I make you care about, this thing, either a relationship or a thing or an item or a status or whatever, if I actually make you care about it, then when I take it away from the character, what I've actually done is taken it away from you. And so that is it. That is everything. To right out of the jump, right out of the gate, right at jump, I'm combining metaphors, right out of the gate, you want to make sure that you're doing everything in your power to connect the reader to the character and make them actually care about this character.
I think that um, you this is the key part of opening your chapter, is how you introduce the character to the reader. And that's also why it's not a great idea to start in a dream, or to start, because in a dream, or in a or far in the past, like 10 years in the past or something like that. Because the problem with both of those starts is you're not introducing the character to the reader as they are now. You're introducing the character to the reader as they are in the dream, or as they are or as they were in the past. And then saying, and now love me in the present tense of the story, which
Right.
is not a jump that all readers make that easily.
Yeah.
So that's why you must start with a character in the now, this moment in the character's life. Why is this moment interesting?
Right. And it also that lends to why I dislike what you said, earlier about, well, I personally don't like that where you'll put up with it. I won't put up with the whole dumping your world on me. I'm never going to connect to your world. Your world is cool, and I like being in your world, and I want to explore your world and discover your world, but your world is not what I'm going to connect to. I'm not going to love what your world loves. I'm not going to hate what your world hates. I'm not going to desire what your world desires to gain, and I'm not going to fear losing what your world fears losing. I don't care. I'm never going to relate to your world on a personal, individual basis. So when you have all this massive backstory of your world, and this is the way the world was created, and this is how the gods decided to shape the continents, and like, I don't care about any of that. Like, all of that is cool. I'm not saying it's not, but Jane Smith, she's the character. Make me care about her, and then let her show me her world. Let me explore that world with her, because I care about her and I'm connected to her. And so that's why that old way of, the 2 chapters of, in the days of old, King Theoden came down from Mount Olympus with the scrolls of Ragnarok. And it's like, no, I don't know. No, stop. That died in the 70s, or it should have died in the 70s. And let's just leave it there. There's a lot of things we as humans did that were horrible back in our culture's past. It needs to stay in the past, and that is one of them. The whole dumping your world on me.
So I think one of the interesting things that I do want to mention here as well is something that I'm occasionally guilty of, that you shouldn't do, and that I try to catch in my own editing. And that is, you shouldn't fire hose the world building at the reader either. Which is, you shouldn't make it too dense, right? Because I tend to just throw you into the middle of the world building and then, wait for you to catch up. Well, I don't wait very much, but like, assume that you'll catch up.
Expect.
Expect you to catch up. But the problem is that is not the most, it presents a barrier of entry, right, to the reader. And so I actually, in my editing, do try to slow my chapters down so that the world building comes slower, and they have at least a paragraph or two to kind of absorb the contents. So that's also an important thing to try and balance in your opening chapter, is you want to organically give the reader context of the world, but not too much. Like, you don't want to point a fire hose of fantasy elements at their face and go like, absorb this,
UHF.
Yeah.
So the movie UHF from Weird Al Yankovic's, where
Yeah.
they had the kids show, and the one guy was like, "It's time for the fire hose," and they have that little 6-year-old child like 5 feet away from a fire hose, and he turns it on, and it blows the kid across the building. Like, that's exactly what it is. So the way I try to teach it, and I think it works, constantly ground yourself into, what does the reader need to understand this moment, and only this moment that we're in? Do they need to understand that King Theoden came down from Mount Olympus with the scrolls of Ragnarok to understand that your, you know, chick is an orphan and trying to get breakfast with no money. Like, I would probably say no. They don't need to know any of that stuff. Now, but you're like, but she's gonna have to get the scrolls of Ragnarok and she's gonna have to go up the mountain. Yes, she is. Like in chapter 17.
Yeah.
Like in this chapter, she's trying to not starve in the streets of this massive city. You know, that's what's interesting. That's what I need to know.
So one of the peanut gallery has reminded me of a thing that I said in one of my earlier videos, way earlier, when I spoke about things readers want, which is it helps to think of a reader as a cat. Okay. So I don't know if you've ever petted a cat, but they're charming. My cat especially is a charming little kitten, and she will roll over and expose her belly and want to be petted. But only 2 times. The third time, if your hand comes down, it's all like claws and pet me with your eyes. Because that's what cats are like. And readers are much the same way. They're like, I want fantasy. I want all the things I want. Pet me with your eyes. Too much, too much. It is a fine line to walk, but especially in your opening chapter, it's important. And that doesn't just include fantasy words, as I found out the other day when I sent one of my first chapters for critique. Now, it was an alchemist opening, and I thought, well, it would be fine because these are just alchemical terms. Everybody knows what an astrolabe is and what an elixir is and what a brazier is. I mean, these are just words. People know them, right? No. No. Apparently people do not, because they were asking me what these fantasy words mean, and I'm like, that's English.
Yeah. Did you not take 11th grade science lab? Because we messed with that stuff.
The problem is it's not even that. Like, you actually do have to have read about, but I don't know. I make certain assumptions about vocabulary that apparently are terrible. Because I had somebody say to me the other day, like, this can't be an English word about the word undulating. And I'm like, undulating is an English word.
Yes.
I am not going to explain to you what undulating means.
So my only thing, and I'm not going to say that I explain it, but I do try, and anytime I'm using an archaic word, or because I make up fantasy words too, I try to make sure that it's written in a way that a person with any type of intelligence should be able to get it from context. Now, not that doesn't mean that everyone with intelligence is going to get it. There are going to be people that are very, very smart that still don't get it, because this is all there's too much variety of humanity out there. But I do try to write it in a way that most, maybe 80% of the people are going to get it from context that don't know the word. 100% of people that know the word, if you know undulating, you know what it means, you're just going to go right through it. But I'm going to write that sentence in a way that somebody who doesn't know the word undulating has a really good chance of getting what undulating means without looking up. Because gone are the days, back in the 1800s and early 1900s, people literally read fiction books in the hopes of running across words that they had to look up in the dictionary. They literally kept dictionaries next to them. That was a common thing, to keep a dictionary next to you so that when you hit a word that you had never seen before, you could look it up. Like, readers don't want that. And I don't want that for my readers. I don't want my readers putting my book down to go read some stupid dictionary. Like, no, stay in my book. I don't need you leaving. So, and I don't think readers want that anymore. I don't think they're looking to learn new words.
So, I mean, yes and no. I enjoy encountering a word I don't know. And especially reading on Kindle on my phone these days, I just press the word and it pops up with a dictionary definition. And I'm like, I learned a new word. Like,
yeah.
So it depends a little bit for me. And And I mean, I hear you, and I hear the people whose comments were like, what is it this? What is it that? And I'm like looking at them going, they're all English words. That whole paragraph is just English.
Mm-hmm.
And I get where they're coming from. It's not that, you know, the problem is that they don't know it's all English words, so it feels like fantasy
Mm-hmm.
words.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why you do have to be careful of in your opening chapter. I mean, but, you know, on the other hand, there's China Melville writing prose so dense that even I'm like, what? and he's, you know, sold like 100,000 books. So, you know, follow your dreams, kids.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is actually a good statement. I mean, I am a blue collar worker. I am a blue collar writer. I am a blue collar speaker. I'm a blue collar through and through. You know, I don't come from the background of, you know, I'm a literary whatever that went to literary school and did literary stuff and then, you know, was a linguistics master. So I chose this as my career because, you know, no, I'm a former combat Marine. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I just speak the way I speak and I write the way I write. And I do believe that it's gripping and it's engaging and it's emotional and it's immersive, but you're not going to see a lot of, well, I mean, I still say one of my favorite reviews of my work was from a professional reviewer. And he gave me a 5 out of 5 stars. But he said, while Drake is a very immersive, very gripping writer, I never found myself marveling over his use of prose. Like, if you're looking for flowerful, you know, big word language that you're going to have to, or that you're going to get the opportunity to learn new words that are, you know, from the English language that you had never heard of before, I'm probably not your guy.
Yeah.
I try to keep it very, because to me that lends to the immersiveness of it. It lends to you're not thinking about anything but the story. You're not thinking about words. You're not thinking about sentences. You're not thinking about paragraphs. You're thinking about like, oh my goodness, this is gripping and exciting and terrifying and sad and happy and elated, you know, all just everything. So, but that is the type of person I am. So therefore it's the type of writer I'm going to be. And, you know, that's fine. It's just the way there are billions of readers out there, and there are readers out there that want, no, I want to learn, you know, new words every other paragraph. And then others that are like, yeah, I don't like, what's a beaker? Why do you have a fantasy word of a beaker? Like test tube, test tube. I've never heard that word. Is that a magical word?
Well, I mean, you know, there's the Malazan found an audience, a massive audience, and it's one of the most complicated anthropological world building phenomena I've ever seen, and it fire hoses the world at you. Like, if you think I world build dense, you should read Malazan.
Somebody sent me a meme in the last couple of weeks, and it said, there are 2 types of magic systems in fantasy. And the first one was a picture of Einstein standing next to this chalkboard that was probably about 12 foot tall and about 20 foot wide. And it literally was just covered in mathematical equations just across the board. And then the bottom frame, it was something from some type of anime thing. But it's an anime character screaming, you know, right at the audience, and he screams. And I would use cleaner words than was in here, but he was like, because it's freaking magic, fool. He didn't say it exactly like that. He was a little more colorful, but it was still the same thing. Like, that's it. Those are the 2 types of magic systems.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, okay. So back to opening chapters. So
yes.
We've spoken, we got a little bit off track there. But yeah, so you do want to set the context, introduce the fantasy, bring in that your world in an organic way, but at the same time you don't want to overwhelm the reader, and you need to like find that line to walk, and the line will be different for every author. Like not every author walks the same line.
Yeah, no,
and it's
you can't.
important to understand that
Your author's voice is derived from your personal well of experience. Period. End of discussion. There is no 2 authors that are the same, because of the fact that no 2 people on this planet have lived the same lives.
Yeah. Then I think the other thing that you really need to consider in your opening chapter is make sure that either in your opening chapter or in your prologue, and this is a legitimate use of prologue, meet your genre expectations. All right. So let's say, for example, you're writing a portal fantasy. Okay. But you don't want to, in the first chapter, you don't want the character to go through the portal. You want them to be in the real world for a little bit first. Then maybe a legitimate use of the prologue is to show something about the portal world, to show something happening in the portal world or something like that, to remind the reader that this is the genre that we're going into. Because you want the reader's expectations of the genre to be there in chapter 1.
Yes, I can see an argument for going, I mean, if my cover lets you know what it is, I mean, like Chronicles of Narnia, it doesn't open up and with any type of hint in the story. Now, the cover and the back blurb tells you that that these kids find a magical portal and go to another world. But the first couple of chapters, they're just children that are their parents are worried for them. The town's being bombed. They send them to some relatives way up north. They get there. It's a cold, kind of standoffish place. They're left to their own devices. It's a boring old manor, and they're just wandering around trying to entertain themselves. Like there's literally no hint that Narnia exists in the beginning, in the first couple of chapters, and then they find the wardrobe.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the name of the book is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So you get from context that this is going to be this type of story, I think. Now I agree with you. If organically you can work it into that first chapter, you 100% should. Like there's no doubt about that. But I would just warn against shoving something in that doesn't fit.
I agree. And that's why I always like my advice is like it is a good place to hit a prologue. If you can't fit it in, it is a good justification for a prologue to meet your genre expectations.
Maybe, but this is where we differ a little bit because I feel like if you want to know if you've been successful with prologue, just read the first word. If it says prologue, you failed. But that's just
I
me.
disagree with you.
I know.
I disagree with you on a very deep fundamental level.
I know.
And I have a lot of examples to bring to the bear, like George R.R. Martin and A Game of Thrones, where he met his genre expectations with the prologue of the dudes, the introduction of the others.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest, the chapter 1 is basically medieval politics, medieval politics, medieval politics, but there's a threat coming, and the prologue serves as a means to introduce that threat.
Yeah. No, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just disagreeing that was the best way to do it. But let's not get into that. Yeah, but I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's the thing. Almost everything in creative writing is subjective, which means Marie is 100% right. It also means I'm 100% right. Like that's kind of the definition of subjectivity. You're right based off of your beliefs and your side of how you look at things. It doesn't mean, and neither one of us are wrong. That is the whole thing about this. And
I just want to raise something about Narnia because I actually just looked up on the Kindle. Of course, I just looked up on the Kindle what the opening chapter is, and Lucy absolutely goes into Narnia within like the first 10% of the Kindle.
It has been a long time since I read that book.
Yeah.
I think I was 10 or 11 when I read Chronicles of Narnia the last time and the first time. I've only read it once.
Yeah.
So in my memory, it took them a while to get to Narnia.
No, it took them a while to get there, but Lucy goes there very early, and then the other kids don't believe her. She goes there like the first night. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking about some other things, and like one of the examples that popped in my head was On a Pale Horse, the first book of the Incarnations of Immortality by Piers Anthony. So it opens up with just a dude who's down on his luck. He's lost money. He's just, his whole life is just crap. And he goes through, you get the world building as he's walking through town, and he's bought a few little things and all of that. But you pretty much know that he's at the end of his rope. What you don't know is what he's been gathering is that he plans on committing suicide at that night. That's what he's doing. And so the chapter leads all the way up to that. So you don't really get anything about the genre. And like the last couple of paragraphs, he takes the gun, he puts it against his head, he starts to pull the trigger, and then Death walks in the door, and he freaks out and he shoots Death in the face.
Yes.
And then in the next chapter, it's like, oh, now you're Death. That's how you become Death. You kill Death. So now you're Death, and you'll pass it on to somebody who kills you.
100%, but you get it in the first chapter.
Right. Yeah. No, that's what I was saying. Yeah. You do 100% get it in that first chapter. You just get it in the last couple of paragraphs of it.
Which is fine, because a reader that likes enough of your style to keep reading past your first page will probably give you the first chapter. Yeah. Like if they're not put off by your style, they'll probably give you the first chapter. And if your hook is at the end of the chapter, that's soon enough, right? It's cool. But the genre element has to be there.
Right. The hook for the story.
Or it has to be in your prologue. One of the two.
Everything else in that chapter was very interesting. So there was nothing that you were always like, oh, this is interesting. What's going to happen here? Oh, this is interesting. And then it just comes out of the left field that he kills himself. Or, doesn't. But yeah, let's go through this list that we kind of did, because we've been letting it get a little long on the tooth. So
100%. There's just one thing. One of the peanut galleries asked, does it work to open with the character's internal thoughts and contemplations on something specific within the story? And I don't think so. Before you ask me to care about the character's internal worries, make me care about the character. Show me the character's life and make me care. Give me their emotions.
I'm going to say depends. I would say 99% of the time you're right that's going to be a tough one, but I can see where you could. It's just that it depends on how you rotate that around. I start off, and I don't start off the chapter that way. It's a couple pages in, but I've got one novella that the guy thinks about how the fact that when he was 6 years old and an orphan living on the street, that he and another 6-year-old were huddled together during kind of an ice storm. And he remembers the boy when he stopped shivering. And yet he still clung to his body for warmth, even though he knew he was holding a dead child. And I don't go into it anything past that because I don't need to. It is such a dramatic kind of loss and horrifying thing to know that this character lived through that. It does a great job of connecting you to that character's past and how the character has been developed from that moment, that it's there. So there's a lot that depends on so much.
You can. I would exercise caution with that opening, and also I would keep it short. You don't want to be giving me paragraphs of inner monologue about the philosophical dissertation of how the character feels about XYZ. All right. So the list, we have a list.
All right, so how do you feel about starting too early?
All right. So I don't like it when you start at a place that's boring. Okay. It doesn't have to be conflict filled. It doesn't have to be action filled. You don't have to open like a James Bond movie. Okay. But there does need to be tension.
There has to be a reason why the movie starts there.
Yeah. Why did you open in this time?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I laugh because, and it's going to date me, but old cartoon called Ren and Stimpy. There was one reoccurring skit where something horrible would happen and they would turn and they go, Mr. Horse, how do you feel about this? And he was like, don't like it. Nope, don't like it. And I don't know why, when you said that, it just made me think that scene popped in my head. And so it made me laugh.
I'll make a converse on that. Also, don't start your story too late. So if you have to flash back in your first chapter to explain anything in your story, you have started too late.
And this is one of those that we
Again,
get thrown as well.
this is sorry, too early. Too late. No, too late.
Yeah, too late.
Because you have had to go back to explain why we're here. No.
Right.
Then start there. You know, don't start.
And this is one of those things that we disagree on a little bit. We're the same on almost all of it. But it goes back to what I said earlier in this podcast, which is only give them what they 100% need to understand this moment of this character's life. So like in that novella, and it is like 3 or 4 pages in when you get that little moment of him as an orphan growing up on the streets. But at the end of this chapter, he basically finds out he's the only one that can save this child. But you've learned through the chapter that there's no way in Hades that he would ever survive if he tried to go save this little girl. But because you learn about how he feels about children, then when he makes that decision, you're good with it.
But that is not a full flashback.
Right. No, 100%.
It's a line or two of, this reminds me of this thing.
Yes.
In my past. That's fine. That's building out the character.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about
is
when you go into italics and describe the scene that happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
No. In that case, start the story 2 weeks ago.
We are 100% agreement on
jump.
that. Yeah, we are 100% agreement on that. If you start in and it can be really small, little innocuous things. Like when we were working on Magic Fall, my first chapter that I started, I flashed back to 5 minutes before the scene started. And it was, when I wrote it, it was fine. And it really didn't do anything to me. And then you pointed out, and it was like, I really could just start 5 minutes. I mean, 5 minutes can go in a couple sentences, or 5 minutes could take an entire chapter. Manipulating time is whatever. So just starting there and doing it in a couple sentences, I don't have to now break the now and go back 5 minutes ago to do this thing. So while it didn't bother me when I wrote it, once it was pointed out to me, it's like, yeah, that's kind of dumb, isn't it? I can just go ahead and back up 5 minutes and have that event happen, because that event needs to, the reader needs to see that event that happened 5 minutes ago. So why not start 5 minutes ago?
Exactly.
So little things like that creep in. But the big one is, last week I lost my arm in this botched theft. And so you're going to introduce me to this one-armed character. And then 3 paragraphs in, you're going to have a 5-page flashback where I go and I actually am doing the heist and I have 2 arms. And it's like, no, if that scene is so important for the story, then you should have turned the camera on back then. That's where you start the story. Let me live that and then bounce here. And I already know that he lost his arm in a botched heist because I was there.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. All right.
So that's the timing on your chapter. Not too late and not too early.
Yeah.
Pick me with your eyes.
A couple others. We've already talked about overloading world building. Here's one. Lack of stakes. Starting off, and this kind of goes with what we just talked about. There has to be a reason why this is the scene. So, I always talk about there's 4 things that you need to do at the beginning of every scene. Whose head am I in? Where am I at? Why am I here? And what is the thing, the cool thing that is the reason, that for this chapter, this scene, this whatever. Your opening of your novel, those 4 things are exponentially more important. And so there has to be some type of conflict. Now, conflict doesn't mean fighting, like you said a few seconds ago. It could be whatever. It can be internal conflict. It could be conflict of, a hope for the future, or a regret for the past, or, whatever. There just has to be, and it doesn't have to be the conflict of the actual story. It just needs to be something that makes the reader go, okay, yeah, I got to find out how this goes. And that's what conflict does. Conflict is that thing that makes the reader go, all right, no, I'm interested. I need to find out the answer to this thing. And then they keep reading. And then the conflict gets bigger and the conflict changes and the conflict, whatever. But that's exactly what we're doing. We have to have some type of conflict, or there's just nothing for the reader to catch on to. So you don't want, and you did mention this in the beginning, we shouldn't go into it. Johnny woke up. It was another great day. The sun was shining in his window. He stretched and yawned and sat up in his bed, scratched his butt, reached for his slippers, and he put his left slipper on, and then he put his right slipper on. And then he stood and wandered to the bathroom because his bladder was kind of full. And no, why am I watching this? What is it? I know whose head I'm in and I know where I'm at, but why am I here?
Yeah.
And what's the cool
and
thing?
I think the thing is that people often mistake this for oh, I have to start in action. No, you don't have to start in action, nor should you start in action, in my opinion. You can start in action, but generally speaking, for me, starting in action doesn't work. But there has to be tension. There has to be stakes. There has to be something that the character is trying to accomplish in the opening chapter, something that you are going to interest me, the reader, in.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's they're dropping off a pair of eyeballs at a fence as a warning to not steal, or whatever.
It comes down to two words. What's the problem, or what is the struggle?
Yeah.
Now, that problem or struggle could be the guy in front of me is trying to take my head off with a giant magic sword. That's a good struggle. But it could also be, if I'm late to work, I'm going to get fired. Or whatever. There has to be something.
Some kind of tension.
Yeah. And it has to be immediate. And it really should be there in every single scene. But the opening.
So I do also want to caveat this. This doesn't mean that you need to immediately spell out the stakes to the reader. You can have something that's just plain a little bit interesting to keep their attention for a few paragraphs. Right? Because I don't want people to get the impression that we're saying start with, oh my God, if I don't make this meeting, I'm going to get fired.
Right. I was just using that as an example.
Yeah. You can start with something that's just interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's just an interesting statement, and introduce the conflict and tension a little later. But there needs to be something that the character is wanting to achieve in the scene.
And by extension, the reader wanting to find out how it's achieved.
Yes.
And we've kind of talked about this, but maybe we should put a pin, stick the landing a little bit better. What about not connecting the reader to the POV?
Yeah, so this is a really complicated one because you never know what's going to connect readers exactly to POV. So you're trying for your best bet here. But you want to offer the reader some kind of emotional resonance with the character, something that is big enough, that is universal enough that most readers can go, yeah, I can, okay, we can get along. You and me, we can at least walk the same path for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody in the peanut gallery wrote authenticity. Something that makes the character feel like they're real, like they're not just some two-dimensional thing. But again, and I said this earlier, but it's worth repeating.
So the reason why I'm hesitating is because yes, but at the same time, you also want a certain amount of likability. So you can be authentically yourself and a mass murderer You know, like, and the authenticity of that is not necessarily going to make me want to follow you in the novel. You know, and I'm thinking here like Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire. I did not finish because the main character is authentic and I hated him. So yeah, I mean, yeah. If you want
So
to
maybe
attract
it's like this.
maximum
This is an
readers, I guess a
interesting.
little bit of likability goes a
Well,
long
but
way.
this is an interesting thought experiment because in As Good as It Gets, when you meet Jack Nicholson's character, there's nothing likable about him. He is racist. He is sexist. He is homophobic. He is a bigot. And he literally takes a Yorkie and throws it into the garbage chute of a 4-story apartment building, which technically should have killed the dog. Like there's no redeeming qualities on the surface. However, there's an underlying pain and misery in him that makes you go, you're a piece of garbage, but I can tell that you hate it.
Yeah.
And we all do things that we would love not to do. You know, I might play video games a little more than I should, and I could use that time more wisely, or I might do this, or chemical dependence, or whatever. So even though he is 100% irredeemable, and I think maybe if I didn't read your example, but I think maybe if you look at that, there probably wasn't anything like that in him.
Yeah.
So
So I go read the opening chapter and of just read the opening chapter of that book and tell me you find anything to like there, because I
yeah, and see,
found
I
nothing.
think that's the difference where we take this horrible character and
Yeah.
As Good as It Gets, and yet there is an underlying of, you don't even like how you are, but you do not see any way of changing anything. And then in the next scene we also see how mind-numbingly, soul crushingly lonely he is, and how he is desperate for human connection, but because of who he is and because of his mental tics and all of that, he can't fix himself. And so
But
that
also
gives
bear
us
in
that.
mind, yeah, no, all of that's true, but also bear in mind that As Good as It Gets is a movie. I've paid for the ticket. I'm I have now been replaced by my cat.
Yes.
I'm my baby boy. I've paid for the ticket. I'm invested in the in at least being here for a while,
But I
right?
think that's,
And I
I don't,
know it's only 2 hours.
I, but
And
I think there's
maybe I'm
something more.
there with other people and so on. In a novel, it is different because I have DNF'd a lot of books
Right.
based on the first chapter.
No, I hear what you're saying. I think it's different. I think in Good as It Gets, you still have a connection with the Jack Nicholson character in the, wow, I hope, like I see that you are in pain. I see, and so you have that compassion for the character. Um so I don't know. I think
Yeah,
there
but
is
if you,
something
like
different
somebody in
there.
the peanut gallery said, hate is the tension, you know, and I'm like, no, because if I actually actively hate the character, I'm not reading on. I'm done. The tension's
Yeah.
passed me by.
Yeah. And that's where I think
I
the difference
closed
is.
the
And that's
book
why,
and I did not finish.
well, and that's where the I think the difference is, and why this is such a good thought experiment, because in that
Yeah.
opening of As Good as It Gets, you also hate that character, but you feel sorry for him. You
Yes.
feel a desire to see him get fixed. Whereas I will bet that that's missing in this thing that you're using as example.
Yeah, you definitely don't feel sorry for York.
Yeah. So again, a good thought experiment because of the fact that, how do we take an incredibly unlikable character and yet make the reader want to keep following that character after the opening scene? And I think they nailed it in As Good as It Gets. I really do. So,
Yeah.
like, it's one of my favorite movies of an example to take a character who is irredeemable right from jump. And yet
Mm.
you still want to kind of follow that. You still want to see him succeed.
Yeah.
So, and that's
Yeah, you've got to try and get the reader connected to the character in some way, ground them in the character in some way.
yeah.
And that's not the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But that's the thing.
So just to put a pin in this one, and like I said, I mentioned earlier, but it bears repeating. Make the reader love what the character loves, hate what the character hates, desire what the character desires, fear losing what the character fears losing. So, like in As Good as It Gets, you still get that he desires human connection. And every human knows that that's one of the worst punishments you can experience as a human being is just complete isolation. And so there's that human connection with this horrible, racist, bigoted, misogynistic, literally horrible human being. You still have that empathy for him. It's like, but man, that's a horrible punishment to go through life like you're going through. So, and he has a desire to fix it. He just doesn't know how to do it. So that's that. We talked about cliche beginnings, dreams, and all of that. So I think we've done that, unless you have something to add for that.
Nope.
We've talked about lack of conflict and tension. We've talked about overwriting mundane prose. All right, here's one we haven't talked about, and I think this will bring us to a close. How do you feel about bait and switch?
I do not like a bait and switch. I'm hoarse again, aren't I?
Nope, don't like it. Don't like it
Nope,
one bit.
nope, I don't like it.
So why? What are some examples of it?
So let me give you a bait and switch. The character that you're following in chapter 1 dies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and now you're suddenly in a new chapter, in a new guy. I don't like it. You've just attached me to this character, and then you killed him in chapter 1 before I've even really grown attached to him. And now what is my confidence level? This is your first chapter. What is my confidence level that you're not going to do this in chapter 2?
Yeah.
Now I've disengaged from your plot.
Yeah.
Or let's say you're setting me up as a fantasy story, right? And you're like, first chapter is all fantasy, fantasy, fantasy. And then chapter 2 starts 1,000 years later, they were in a spaceship with quantum computers. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But I was magicking like 1 second ago.
I was magicking. So it does work for certain genres. I mean, the murder mystery genre is very, very, very used to being in the head of a character that dies. Or a character who stumbles upon a body of somebody who's dead, but that character is then not ever the POV again, ever either. So that genre is very comfortable with the opening chapter being the murder itself. They don't do it all the time, but it definitely is a trope. But other genres are not as forgiving for that same thing. It does become much more problematic.
If you want to kill a character in the first thing, put it in the prologue.
And the funny thing is that in my head, I was going, this is one of the things that I think doesn't work with prologues is when you just have a character and you kill them off.
Actually, it does work with prologues because the reader kind of expects the prologue to not necessarily be the character they're following.
True.
Yeah,
I mean, there's just several things. We're so alike on so many things, but there are a few things that we just see differently, and it's fine. I'm just not a fan of prologues.
I know. I will justify prologues until the cows come home.
Yeah. And a lot of it is my writing style too. I want to just be in the moment right now. I start everything I start in media res. We are here. We are now. This is where you're at. And you'll learn everything as we move from this point out. And prologues just Although that thing that I read, I called it
See, I think one of the reasons
Prelude.
why prologues are so hated is because, or why people, speak so poorly of prologues is because a lot of them have been used wrong a lot
Yeah.
of the time. They've been used as like info dumps, or they've been used as things that really should have been chapter one and so on, right? And I absolutely agree. Like a badly written prologue is a problem. But that doesn't mean that all prologues are bad. That's like saying most chapter ones are bad, so all stories should start with chapter two.
I can get on that bandwagon. Yeah. No, I called it. It's not a prologue. It's the prelude. That's what I named it. Prelude.
Now that is such semantics.
It's not a prologue. It's a prelude. And actually, I do want to plug this. I am writing a new project that I'm only going to write one chapter a month on. I'm just going to devote maybe a day or two to it a month, but I am giving it out in my newsletter. So if you go over to starvingwriterstudio.com and sign up for my newsletter, every month you'll get the next chapter of this. So just something to think about. Links down below if you want to read a new book of mine. I will warn people that you either may think this is a fantastic idea or the dumbest thing ever. But I am doing my version of Hamlet. I'm rewriting Hamlet. So that will either upset you or excite you. I've never seen anybody in between. So if you'd like to read my take on that, head on over. And it's not a play, it's a prose. It's a novel. I'm not doing it as a play, and I'm not keeping any of Shakespeare's verbiage for the most part. So there you go. That's my plug.
Cool. And I think, like, we've covered all the starts. I think the most important thing about a chapter is about your chapter one is attach the reader, meet your genre expectations, and focus on getting the reader to the point where they understand the tension and the tension is pulling them forward. And I think you'll be good.
Yep. 100%. Now I want to say your line. On that note, I think that is a good place to end this episode, and we will see you next time for another episode.
Bye.
And it still makes it passive. But understand, like, this is something I would probably keep reading. Like, if I wasn't critiquing this and I'm just reading it for pleasure, there's nothing in that yet that makes me go, oh, I'm out.
Yeah.
Nothing. Like, that's a good start.
So yeah, so I mean, there's things you can work on, definitely, and things you can fix and so on. But I think that's a strong start. Good,
Yeah.
strong start. All right, and I think that is a good note on which to end this episode. And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Marie Mullaney, your co-host on this literary adventure. Our goal is to provide you with valuable insights and discussions on writing. If you believe in our mission, please like and subscribe our podcast. Sharing our episodes with your community not only helps us grow, but also contributes to a richer, more diverse conversation about storytelling. We appreciate your support. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.